Welcome back to the Gentleman's Romantic Book Nook. As the cabin doors close on our journey through the galaxy with Helva, a few questions remain on our lips. Does Helva find the one she's meant to be with? Should they have installed robotic lips on her shell casing? Should Shaq be allowed into space? This and even more shocking conclusions are found in this week's thrilling climax of the Gentleman's Romantic Book Nook. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a galactic journey into love and literature. I am your host, Lucky.
And I am Mac W. Money, broadcasting to you live from Portland, Oregon. Today, we are finishing up our conversations on The Ship Who Sang.
Now that we've kind of gotten to the enders of the book, Mac, I have a little game I'd like to play with you.
Ooh.
And if you couldn't tell by my little lead in there, I have taken the most negative reviews from both The Ship Who Sang and wildly popular sci-fi book, Ender's Game, and I'd like to read this to you and have you guess between them.
I have read both, so this will be difficult. If it starts complaining about like absurd levels of homoeroticism in the cadets, I'm gonna guess that's Ender's Game.
This is a 1-star review. This one's a little bit easy. Embarrassing sentimental tripe masquerading as science fiction. Dyllanizing indeed. How did this author get to be so popular?
Okay, the Dyllanizing gives that away as The Ship Who Sang final answer.
You got it. You got the first one right. I did say that was a little bit easier. Let's give you something.
There's a warm-up round.
This is a 2-star review. 2.5, or even a little higher, really. But despite the interesting idea, it still had all the pitfalls of the author. Commentary a little too transparent, a little too romantic.
A little too romantic. Could not possibly describe The Ship Who Sang. Is that Ender's Game?
Your first swing and a miss. No, that is indeed The Ship Who Sang.
Oh, they thought it was too romantic?
I know. I'm indignant about that review as well. I had to make an account to respond to some of these people. It's a 1-star review. I didn't realize this book was for teenagers.
Ender's Game.
Nice. Wow, you're on a roll here. You are tuned in with the reading audience. Here is a 2-star review. I can't believe I liked this when I was 12. Ugh. Rereading as an adult, it was horribly painful.
Ender's Game again.
Incorrect. The Ship Who Sang.
Oh.
that was our Ship Who Sang.
Hold on. I want to just unpack that one a little bit. So They read The Ship Who Sang as a teen and loved it. Mm-hmm. And then as an adult, they revisited this like cradle of literature for them, and they didn't like it.
They didn't like it. I would say they were 12, so they were still pre-teen stage, right when the romance was high in their heart.
It does say tween. It does say teens, tweens, and in-betweens.
Right there on the spine of The Ship Who Sang. I've got one final 1-star review for you. Wow. I'm really going to lean into this one because I think this will be a little difficult. Look at the cover and imagine the book within. Note the exclamation points in the tagline. That book you're imagining? This is so much worse. It's just so bad, guys. So bad.
Wow, that's vague. And also, they're both decent books. I can see someone having a visceral hatred of The Ship Who Sang more than Ender's Game. I'm going to say Ship Who Sang final answer.
And the final question, you got it right. That one was The Ship Who Sang. We weren't keeping points, but I have to say, since it's just you and I, you won my game. Congratulations.
Thank you. That was somewhat difficult. I didn't realize people hated either book, really.
The negative reviews on Ship Who Sang were kind of surprising. People did not like Bob Dylan.
Well, to be fair, some of the cultural references were a little, not even dated, but just don't put cultural references in a book that's supposed to be taking place hundreds of years, if not thousands of years in the future, because it's not going to last the test of time. It'd be like mentioning any modern artist would be so confident.
And we've had this debate before, though. Bob Dylan has had a chart-topping album every decade since the 60s, so technically he is timeless at this point.
You know who's also kind of a freaky deaky? Helva. She, I think slowly as the book went on, we get a little bit more of her freaky deaky side, spying on some people. And it wasn't until the last story here, which we'll get to, but This is by far the most romantic chapters we've read, the most sexual chapters we've read, and probably, I think you said this after we finished reading the book, the chapters that gave me and you the most like blue balls of all of them. Just like build me up and then don't even knock me down. Just leave me there.
These were some very sexual chapters. I'm very glad you said that. I wanted to get that point across early. Not sexual in a consent way, which apparently is a trope in the books that we read, but sexual in a way that I think we'll unpack here in a little bit. Getting into maybe some of the review, we're starting with the disassembled ship. Do you have maybe like a rundown for us, a little taste for the audience to know what happened?
Yeah, we read the final 2 stories this last week, and the first one is The Ship Who Disassembled. And so basically, Helva gets teamed up with this total wang of a Brawn named T-Ron. And that's T-E-R-O-N. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing it right. T-Ron, who basically sees her as an object instead of a woman. So totally unrealistic. And then he invites some smugglers on board while they're on like a random mission. And they both get kidnapped. Or he gets douche-napped and she gets ship-napped. And anyways, these are some real bad hombres who've been ship-napping shell people and turning them and like putting them in a fucked up zoo. I guess I could just run you through the whole thing. The smugglers end up getting high on laugh gas that Helva was carrying, and then she blows their brains into mashed potatoes with a sex song.
She's able to blow out their brains with a sex song, and then she has a fun divorce later and gets highly rewarded for her troubles, which I think is a nice little tying end for the disassembled ship.
I really liked this story because it was like getting her into some real danger beyond having her brawn put in harm's way. In the stories before, we've seen like Kira get kidnapped or her maybe being in trouble with the Central Worlds, but Helva herself, the Shelva inside the ship, was like not really in too much danger before this story. So that was like pretty harrowing for me.
There wasn't really a moment where she physically was in danger other than, I guess, escaping the solar flare with Jenin, but that was more like emotional danger because she knew he was going to die in that part of her ship. But yeah, we haven't really seen her in that emotional state before.
The danger in that first story is that she was going too fast for the human beings on board to survive the like pull.
Though I do have to say, if we could have another death where Helva had to go very quick to kill somebody, Tehran would absolutely be my choice for that instant death. That guy was a real Wang patrol. I do not enjoy his presence in this book.
Yeah, he's piloting an incredibly advanced, like, neuro-powered ship with a human being inside of it. And he's constantly like, someday we'll have autopilot. And then there'll be no mistakes. Like, bitch, Helva is a genius. She's the most famous ship in the galaxy. And she has a wonderful singing voice. And you are treating her like she's some 2-bit Nancy.
It's what annoys me so much about Tehran in general because, he is just so the antithesis of Jenin. And I actually think I'm angry with Anne McCaffery about this because these whole stories, everyone Helva's partnered with is a little bit worse. I think Kira is kind of nice, and it's just a downward slope, maybe to justify the partner we're going to end up with, which we'll get to. But, it does feel like we're seeing worse and worse. So then eventually, when the audience reads who Helva ends up with, we can say, well, it wasn't as bad as the other people.
So I do have a question about this story for you. So the song that she sings is like some sultry tune from an off-world. But what song do you think it would be that she would sing? What song would scramble dudes' brains?
With the sheer volume or the repetitiveness? Because that is 2 separate answers.
Either way, I mean, if you think that she sang, 99 bottles of...
It's Booty Tooch for sure.
Booty Tooch.
There's no other answer.
So sexy.
The last time I listened to Booty Tooch, I certainly almost had my head explode. What about for you?
I just have so many Ed Sheeran jokes that I want to make, and my mouth cannot keep up with my brain. I was almost like, Ed Sheeran.
Sheeran, any of them.
So I guess that's it. Yeah, that's my answer. It's like scrambling my brains up for breakfast scramble.
So Helva gets taken by this group, and I'm going to do my best here to pronounce it. I looked up a pronunciation, which was Spanish, and it was Chechon.
Yeah. There's like there's 2 X's in it, and I'm 30 years old, and I still don't know how to pronounce an X unless it's exit. If a word starts with X, I don't even try.
Yeah, I'm moving along. If it's X-ray, nice and easy, above board. Other than that, I'm out.
Perfect. Yeah, but like XI is what? No, I can't do it. I'm so sorry.
These cross-eye cross-ons They are this collector group, basically. I thought of it in kind of like the Marvel terms. I was thinking about like the collector who was getting all of those oddities from around the world.
Oh.
He was collecting the brain chip parts for his own personal entertainment. And he was specifically looking for Helva because of the singing ability that she was able to do for entertainment for him.
They don't have MP3s anymore.
It's like the future, right? I didn't understand why.
I ran out of iTunes gift cards, so I had to kidnap a ship. Really?
Cha, he kidnaps her so easily, too, which really bothers me. You know, they don't really explain how he was able to find out these central worlds codes and all of these very deep secrets. He just kind of does it.
It would have been so easy to explain that he tortured the other shell people, and found some way to access that database. Because presumably they might be able to hack back into the central worlds and find that information. But yeah, there's no way that he would have known. Mm-hmm. But this is a really short story for how much cool stuff happens in it. And it resolves itself very quickly. It's about Tyron being an asshole and then finally getting his comeuppance, because he gets tortured too. And then immediately upon release is like, Helva didn't follow protocol. What saved them was Helva not following protocol. So just a total Wang police the entire way through.
That certainly brings up my favorite part, is when Helva just screams a divorce at him. And I love that this is the way it's handled for brain chips. All you got to do is have a line open and declare it like, I declare divorce! And it just works.
You can't just say you're divorced and then be divorced.
Only if you're a brain chip, apparently. Because I guess you can't sign papers. It's fair. But just
verbal agreements take on a whole new...
the scene of just screaming him off of the ship was so much fun for me. Reading it like, excellent. The comeuppance I've been waiting for this whole story.
What's interesting to me about Tyron's departure is that he follows a similar path that a lot of the other like bad guy characters, bad bronze, follow. We saw Answer in the previous story. This happens where they don't learn their lesson. They are simply jerks from the beginning through the middle and all the way to the end. They're terrible people who then Helva like dispenses with in some way. No one who is shitty to Helva is later like, I'm sorry, you were right. They don't have an arc. And Helva really doesn't have much of an arc other than what her losses and mourning Jenin and then learning to love again and learning to trust again. That's her arc. She doesn't like deal with assholes, which is actually kind of a good way to deal with relationships. Like if they don't respect you, boom, they're gone. If he don't love you anymore, crush him by taking off your ship and hurtling yourself towards the sun.
What she couldn't do, we find out, because of her programming. Just a whole nother thing of Helva's journey. And like I've said before, I really do feel that a lot of these bronze and characters are put in there to justify the means at the end, where we were left with incredible blue balls in a final selection. I think the final thing for this story that's important to mention is this is the moment that Helva actually buys her freedom. With this capture, she rescues all these other brain chips, and it gives her enough money to, and obviously this is kind of indentured servitude, she's able to free herself finally from that situation and be her own ship, which leads us into the second book. I thought that was very nice. It was nice to see a free Helva before we finish the story.
And once again, I want to emphasize, her being sold into ship slavery as a baby by her parents with a debt she has to pay off is not considered a negative thing in this universe. It is glossed over completely. That is not what the book is about.
No, this is about Helva being a person who has a better life because she's a spaceship, and her journey to find tepid love. We talked a lot about the idea that Helva was going to rebel at some point, and I'm pretty surprised that we never got that at any point in this book. I really thought that was going to happen.
Helva's a sheep. She's a follower. All right, that's going to bring us to the penultimate story in the collection. The final story is called The Partnership, sort of aptly named. Lucky, do you want to walk us through what happens in that one?
Sure, I have a little synopsis here to make it easy for you at home. As we know, you were definitely reading along with us, but for those of you jumping in on this story, maybe didn't want to get your feet wet with this book.
Refresh their memories.
Here's what happens in The Partnership. With the reward money from her harrowing encounter with the Kaikon, Helva becomes debt-free at only 10 years of service. However, the Central Worlds Company tries to seduce Helva to remain in service with the tempting offer to be the first interstellar spaceship, a trick devised by one Niall Parolian. Parolian reveals his deep love for Helva, and after a wild bender and sexual assault, Parolian and Helva begin their journey as brawn and brain. And that, unfortunately, is how the book ends.
Your description is really good. I'm like some bad hombre's ship Nepter. And you've got some real wordplay going on there. That's good.
If you try to argue me that there wasn't sex ship, you will assault Mac. We are gonna beef on this podcast.
What Parolin does, and we'll get to this probably more in depth, what Parolin does to Helva would be the equivalent of a man putting his hands on a woman's dress, holding his hands there and saying, I know how to take these clothes off of you, and it's all that I can do not to. And I'm strong enough not to disrobe you right now. And then he lets go and walks away. And if that's not sexual assault, then I'm not sure I know what is.
Wow, holy crap. I hadn't thought about it in that sense. I've had that separation because Helva is a ship. Oh boy, that is exactly what happens. And that makes me just so uncomfortable. And it's a little bit glorified in this story. What's interesting about this story too, and the part I left out from my synopsis, is the mission she's supposed to go back and do will send her back to Beta Corvi, where she became one of those jellyfish aliens and had that cool sex romp. I thought that was an interesting kind of tie-in because they're asking her to go back and talk to the human transplants again and maybe like get nasty with Niall when she's there.
Man, I was so excited to see her go back to the Shakespeare planet and see how they were coming along with Romeo and Juliet, their sequel to Romeo and Juliet. But they don't, it's all Helva in the space station, essentially getting over her shitty relationship that she just got out of, her divorce with Tyron.
Oh yeah, her divorce.
Her divorce with Tyron. And then talking to Broly, who's another spaceship. And I just want to take a moment to say, Broly is, and you cannot convince me otherwise, her gay best friendship.
100%. He runs the city and he's a gossip king. I mean, come on.
And he's constantly like calling, oh, that divorce, huh? Oh, honey. And at one point he's like, girl, you better check your acid level. And it's like, what? That's such a good line.
It was very catty. I love that line. It was very tasty.
You need some acids, girl. You're just spewing it all over my face. Like, that's good. I'm stealing that. And then later, Helva even calls him a queen gossip.
That one was not a very veiled thing that Anne had hidden in the story. We knew exactly what Broly was supposed to be.
The list goes on. Broly refers to her boss, who is sort of the new love interest in this story. And he says, that man's pure stud. He'll never settle down with you. Then again, maybe you can convince him. And it's like, yeah, thank you for the support, Broly.
The whole chase scene when Parloin is going on his bender and Broly's like hunting him around the city, like he's got a couple of girls in the cab now, and just giving Helva this like horrible beat by beat, like he didn't sleep with them, but he gave him jewels. I mean, it was intense.
Yeah, because essentially the Central Worlds are trying to convince Helva to go back into service. And then she says, well, I'll do it in exchange for a few things. And she's trying to convince them to let her boss be her new Brawn. And this dude's kind of been a douchebag to her for the last few stories. Pretty much talking down to her. He always calls her Magal, which is sort of it's like maybe a futuristic way of the milady. So he's kind of a jerk, a little bit of an incel.
I saw it in that sense of like the toxic relationship of the 1950s and 1960s, where it's like the man has to do everything and Helva has to clean. And we kind of get this like moment of Helva coming into her own a little bit, but then completely breaking back down because Niall is perfect for some reason. Which I think this is that justification I've been talking about, you know, worse and worse bronze, and then Niall's maybe like the third worst. But I mean, hey, he's not Tyron.
Yeah, so Parolin learns that he might have to be a Brawn, and he immediately goes and like sells all of his shit and heads off to a whorehouse. But before he sort of sets the story on fire and makes Helva think that she's never gonna find love, he does have probably the creepiest moment in the story with her, which we touched on a little bit a moment ago.
The hands to casing experience was terrible. The whole scene of it, this like emotional revelation that he has been in love with Helva, which I think we got maybe the book before, that seemed pretty obvious. And his almost obsession, I think, that Helva talks about, the idea of like the shell obsession in some of these Bronze where they need to see the human form of the people inside. I mean, he even gets like a weird picture made of her, doesn't he?
He is somehow able to generate like a digital image of what Helva looks like inside of her little shell, which it would be just like a semi-deformed fetal body. And he's like sexually obsessed with seeing and touching Helva, not as a ship, but as a deformed fetus woman, which sort of turns her on.
Yeah, it does. It's very annoying that she's loving that moment. She's like, oh, he really wants... Okay. I'm sorry, I did comment that kind of hard. I don't know what it's like to be a shell person. That might be an incredible moment. Like, somebody does want to touch me. This is great. I probably look pretty weird in this case. However, at the same time, she does know she's going to die, and she screams at him to take her virginity.
Yeah, and she says that she trusts him, and he verbally assaults her with this line. And there's a little bit of some harsh language in here, so I apologize. But he says, "Trust me? Why, you fool. You freak out, half-grown, wire-haired retard of a romantic tin-assed fool." And if that's not love, I don't know what is.
Yeah. It makes me feel all warm inside, but like in my gut, because I want to be sick by it.
So Parolin heads off on his bender, and Helva just starts freaking out over him and obsessing over him and chatting with her queen gossip over him. And she starts talking a lot about how he's like too short to be a brawn, but then has this freaky line, which I guess is supposed to show some kind of attraction, where she says, "Small men were often compensated for their lack of stature by another, more generous endowment, and the appetite to match." Boo. Like, you can't even have sex with him, so what does it matter? Like, he may be short, but he's probably got a big cock. Helva, Jesus.
I mean, she does spy on them in the shower. Maybe that's something that she would enjoy looking at. She's like, oh, everyone's been pretty smallly endowed up until now. I'd love a new brawn, and they're short in stature, but
You know Anne McCaffery's husband was a little on the short side.
You know, she wrote this for her husband. This would be book 6 of the short story. And her husband's like, "Anne, you're making me feel bad out here. I need something. I need something to feel right again." She had a perfect thing.
I want to talk about something that's a little controversial. If you want to fuck Helva, you don't have to open her up and touch the shell baby. There's got to be some kind of like fleshlight attachment you could get put into the ship. There's got to be some backwoods planet you can do. It's probably some home device. You know, I can order that on Amazon right now and it gets here tomorrow morning. Certainly in the future, there's got to be some like sex ports that'll make Helva feel something.
If Jenin had lived, that would have been an easy DIY installation. I'm sure that's why they kept talking about the Horsehead Nebula. That's where you get it done. That's why they wanted to go so bad.
The sex
But
nebula.
like you bring up a really good point, because they never mention that, and this whole book is about finding companionship for these shell people. Mm-hmm. How is there not some kind of physical interaction portion to it? You know, she could control like a cool robot arm for handies. I don't understand why that wasn't included in the original design.
I mean, Broly, you mentioned earlier, is running an entire city. In this story, she makes references to shell people that are controlling entire mining operations. We're talking some pretty advanced machinery here. And, you know, a little hand that goes like, is not that complex, in my opinion.
I don't think so either. It seems so easy to do.
In my experience, it's nothing fancy.
Yeah, it's maybe got, 3 things? Grip, move, ungrip. It's so simple.
Well, okay, there's a little bit more artisanal action to it than that, Lucky. Don't sell me short. It's basically, it seems like Parolin wants this job, but can't fucking admit it. He's in love with Helva, but can't express it in any way that's not incredibly creepy. He thinks he can't do the job because he's just gonna be essentially, like I mentioned earlier, this like simile of if she weren't a ship person, he would be like, I can't be your co-pilot because I would just want to ravage you every day. I just would want to, I have an obsession. I just want to fuck you all the time, which is a horrible thing to say. And she's charmed by this, wants him back, yearns for him for the whole story. Finally, he comes back and they still have this like back and forth. And that's the end of the story. That's the end of the book, is that they go for it.
And this is where the blue balls really hit in, because they talk about being Corvikians. They talk about going to Beta Corvi and being in physical bodies together. And then the book ends. The book just ends right there. And it is so frustrating. I kept flipping to the back of the book like, is there more? Did she write like a very 1-paragraph sentence of the Corviki experience?
And now we're going to take a trip to a very rarely visited corner of the Book Nook that I like to call Fan Fiction Corner, where we highlight notable fan fiction from the audience.
God, it's been so long since we've been in this corner. I'm very excited.
I know. Well, this will be our real first foray.
Well, the corner's always been there.
I went on a brief little sojourn just to collect my thoughts and found a great example of fan fiction that takes place immediately after the end of the book. So I thought now would be a good time to bring it up. So Sort of in the break of the naming convention, this user on fanfiction.net, this is from 2006, so it's a little old. This is fanfiction user Batface, who wrote a great little story called Riddick and the Ship Who Sang, which is a delightful crossover between the Chronicles of Riddick franchise and the Ship Who Sang.
Oh, I already have so many hopes for this book. I really hope Helva and Riddick get it on.
Riddick is her new Brawn in this
Excellent.
story. He finds her shipwrecked on a planet, and together they sort of dig their way out. Parolin is dead. She's killed unceremoniously off page by the author of this fan fiction. So that's a first tip of the hat to Batface on that one.
I don't hate it so far. So far, this story is working for me. Get a cool Brawn in there who can definitely be a perfect partner to Helva. Get Parolin just out of there, get him back to the whorehouse or dead or whatever.
No, he dies of pneumonia off page.
Oh my god.
So not even like a space death. The very first line of the first part of this story is Riddick was running, as always. So we already start with some pretty good action. And then as he's like running away from some outlaws, he's heard something that sounded like a song. No, wait, it was a song.
Wow. Oh, this author's incredible so far. I feel like I'm being swept away more so than The Ship Who Sang.
That's what got me, is it's not a particularly well-written fan fiction, but there's like real chemistry happening between Richard Riddick and Helva, the spaceship. She tells him like, what beautiful eyes that you have. How did you get them? Which he doesn't answer just yet because there has to be a little back and forth.
Mm-hmm. A little tease.
I love the ending of part one because he hears her voice. He enters the ship and he's like screaming at her like, I know your name, but where in the vessel are you? Helva sighed heavily. I am the vessel. End of part one. Tell me you didn't get chills.
Oh my god. I'm over here on the edge of my seat. This is incredible. Is this going right to movie? Do you think this is Riddick 4?
I think this is a leaked spec script for Riddick 4. Yes, Lucky, very astute. I want to highlight a couple more great moments. Pretty early on, Helva reveals that she's a baby who's deformed and put in a machine. And Riddick's eloquent response is, and I quote, "That must suck, knowing your parents sold you out to be a science experiment."
So we still get the kind of like jerk Brawn attitude from Riddick. I guess I'm glad we didn't lose that trope.
No. And what's interesting to me is it incorporates a lot of lore from the this is whoever wrote this, Batface, I guess, has like read the book thoroughly. And she talks about Kira and Theoda and like the things that happened in the book inform Helva's decisions in this very short fan fiction. And Riddick, too. He's talking about characters from Pitch Black and other movies in the franchise that I haven't seen. And I was like legitimately impressed that they were able to do this.
Boy, that's really disheartening. That's almost like reading a book you're really excited about and then not having an ending really, or the writing is terrible. You know, you're just left with this feeling inside where you're all pent up and had no release. There's a word for it, I'm sure, that we've mentioned.
And this fan fiction, unfortunately, does end on a cliffhanger of a new Central World's villains sort of trying to find Helva after she's been activated. And the one thing I loved is that we talked about how the Ship Who Sang has all these futuristic cool names. You've got Jenin and Theoda. Even Tyron is like a cool name. The villains in this names are Monty and Gordon.
Oh no, Monty and Gordon.
Which then, to me, at least in the realm of this fan fiction, it means that we had normal names like Richard and John. Then there was a brief period in the future during the first Ship Who Sang book where wacky, crazy future names were in style. And then immediately after that, within 100 years, we're back to like super easy names like Steve and Joe.
I mean, it's cyclical, right? I'm sure 100 years from now on Earth, we're going to get crazy names. I'm planning on naming my kid with 3 X's at the beginning just to really throw the teachers off in school.
Triple X is going to be the name of your son.
Triple X Ion.
That's great. Naming him after Vin Diesel. I see you are a big fan.
Mm-hmm. You know, I've got the goggles. I've got the goggles from Riddick. Yes, the actual ones he wore.
You've got your cosplay. You know what? Next time we go to Comic-Con, you be Riddick and I'll be Helva, and maybe we'll see if anybody recognizes us from the fan fiction.
I think that would be a lot of fun. You know, we could do maybe even like a gender swap, and when we go to DadCon, you could be a male Helva, and I'll do a Riddick, and we'll really throw him off.
Is DadCon a dad convention?
It's a convention made for and by dads.
every year. It was canceled this year, unfortunately, due to the coronavirus.
But once they're back in the full swing, I know that they would love to see a Riddick and Helva. This is a very dad-centric book.
They're doing a Zoom panel on lawn mowing.
You can turn into the webinar on grilling hamburgers.
You want to use charcoal.
If you want to be a real dad, you got to wear socks and sandals while you're doing this. Well, I think that brings to a close The Ship Who Sang by Anne McCaffery, a glorious book. If you enjoyed this, or if you're enjoying anything else we're putting out there, you can reach us at grbooknook@gmail.com. Send us a quick email if you have any questions, thoughts for the next book, anything that we've been discussing here. You can also find us at www.grbooknook.com. That is where we update our new episodes, where we are maybe going to play around with a blog, some other new things coming up in the pipeline.
Yeah, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. If you want to talk about the show, please use the hashtag GRBookNook. That's how we'll be able to find you and spread the word. If you like the show, really the most important thing you could do is tell your friends about it. Just let them know, recommend the show to them, and have them go on, pass by word of mouth. The only advertising we do is on Twitter, so the president uses it.
And if the president uses it, that means it's a perfect platform for everyone to use, and it's totally honest. So make sure you're out there tweeting about us. Only say honest things about how rich we are, how many episodes we have, our millions of listeners, all of the true things.
All right, Lucky. Final thoughts on The Ship Who Sang. Who do you think Helva... I wasn't even going to ask, who do you think Helva should end up with? Because it certainly shouldn't be Parolan.
No, you're talking about building a Braun, maybe, or a Braun from the past. If I was going to put together the Braun that I thought Helva should end up with, obviously it's partly Jinin. He was perfect for her, apparently, for some reason. And then maybe just throw a little Kira in there, put a little of that darkness and sadness in there, and I think you've got a perfect Braun for Helva. She has some needs.
Since we determined there's no sexual component, Helva's kind of pansexual, so she could really go for a nice lady. Every man in the story was kind of rude to her, insulted her, treats her like shit. Every woman that she had with her worked super well with her, got along great, and even had some little sensual type moments. I think that Theoda or Kira would be a perfect match for her, and she should stop trying to find a dude and the whole Braun's not being, they have to be a certain level of height and weight to be a Braun, and yet there are all these I just feel like it's a complete physical overload. Too much man-woman stuff from the 70s.
I completely understand why you would need an intelligence level of a certain amount, because there's all kinds of stuff going on the ship. Get a fucking step stool if you're not tall enough. Why would you need to be certain tall?
We send not super tall people into space now. We send all kinds to space.
Have you seen the video of the International Space Station? Very short men up there, and I think there's some women as well.
They're all short ceilings. You can't send Shaq to space. He's gonna break everything.
We've said it before, and we say it again. You cannot send Shaq to space.
Only in Mac's wildest fan fictions could Shaq ever go to space and meet Helva and fight Riddick for her heart and love.
Ooh, yeah, you should write Riddick 5, which would be that fanfic. And then he brings the Looney Tunes with him and Michael Jordan back into basketball. And then they play. Shit. Here we go. And then they play each other for Helva's love.
It's Riddick 4, Ship Who Sang 3, Space Jam 2 by Mac W. Money.
Yeah, and that's just the first credit. So we're working backward. It's perfect.
If you were a shell ship, Lucky, who would you want to be your Braun? And you can't pick anyone who's in the book.
Oh, thank God. I was so worried I was going to be just cartoned in. Can I pick somebody famous and already alive?
You should 100% pick somebody famous. Because if you were I'd pick my uncle, Tony.
Oh, cool. Tony's so cool, though. He's always got beef jerky.
He's always talking in the movie theater.
He won't leave those damn kids alone. Obviously, you would need somebody to keep you entertained through the vastness of space. So I'm thinking a classically trained actor, somebody who's got a range of voices. Give me a David Tennant. I could easily hurtle through space with him reading off famous Doctor Who lines or something incredible. I could easily also see Ewan McGregor would be another good choice. I think obviously Big Fish is the best movie ever made. And I think that he would have a lot of I would also like to hear just how Star Wars went. I think that would be a couple of years of conversation at least.
Mm-hmm. Can you imagine the prequel jokes that you would get to make?
Oh, I mean, I would roast him into the ground, but he'd have to love me because he's his Braun. I'm his Braun.
He'll be roasting you into the ground because he has the high ground.
Oh, shit. Well, oh no, because then that makes me Anakin. Oh, brother. Boy, I need to really think about my choices. Who would you select?
I would want someone I could sing with. So maybe maybe Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Oh my God,
He
that
and I
would be
could go through space
incredible.
together. Yeah.
Would you make him perform Hamilton, or would you perform it with him?
He can be my understudy if he so desires.
I like this like dominant relationship you're building as a Braun. Just instantly like, Lynn, you know the rules. I get to be the big parts.
I'm the brains heel, Mr. Miranda.
Mr. Miranda, you play the maid character number 3. I'm everyone else.
The fucking thing though is if you got Lin-Manuel, he would kill it as the maid or the nurse
God, I
and
know.
upstage you every fucking time.
And that's what I expect and want, you know, like being in his presence would be incredible in that moment. Lin-Manuel Miranda, if you're listening, please tweet at us. We could really use the followers.
Hashtag GR Booknook, please, Lynn.
I want to ask you a question, and I know that we've kind of played around with this idea before, but I was wondering who you thought was the absolute worst character by far, the real king of groans.
Ooh, I like that name. Oh, do I smell a new segment?
Hang on, do you hear that
of
sizzling? I'm cooking
groans.
something up over here.
Ooh. Who will win the game of groans?
Who will win the game of groans? That's a great question. I think everyone's on the table now, and I think we all have front runners in our mind, but I'd like to hear from you. Who is, to you, the worst character of the ship who sang?
Okay, I'm going to hit you with my number 3, number 2, and then I'll hit you with my number 1, and I'll explain my number 1. Number 3 is going to be Ansra, who was the bitch in the Shakespeare one, who made it all about herself and like tried to even sabotage the mission. But at the end of the day, she did save everyone at one point. So she has the redeeming factor. Boom. Out of the way. I want to say Tyron is number 1, but he's like an a-hole for like 20 pages. So we don't have to put up with him for that long. Number 1, crowned King of Groan for me, is Parolin, the man she ends up with. Because he is her boss, who verbally assaults her, physically abuses her, and then somehow convinces her that he's the best man for the job. And they end up together. Well, at least in the official version. In my headcanon and in Batface's headcanon, he dies of pneumonia like a day later and she ends up hooking up with Riddick. So that's preferable.
I couldn't help but agree with you completely, 100%.
Oh, good.
I rack my mind for another person that, as I was reading the book, I wouldn't go, oh, brother, every time he did something terrible to Helva, which was pretty much every story he was involved in. He truly gets the crown. He gets the crown of groans.
He got double crowned. We both crowned him King of Groans.
Our first double crowning. We haven't read enough romance novels for me to really understand what double crowning is, though I do hope that we stumble upon it in a future book.
Speaking of future books, we are going to be back in a couple of weeks with a new selection. We've narrowed it down to a few options, and I think, without giving too much away, it will be a bit more romantic than where we've been in before. And, I don't know, I just like we got some pretty good selections for you.
Yeah, we're very excited to bring to light some of the maybe more generic love stories where we'll actually get some physical interaction at some point during the book. That should be a nice change of pace from The Ship Who Sang.
Even the Riddick story blueballed me and didn't have any like actual contact. Even if it was just a gentle kiss on the
steel panel.
Some people are into that, apparently.
They couldn't even install like robot lips on the casing. Like, I don't mean to go back to this conversation, but they have that now. You can buy fake lips to kiss. I
will again.
And speaking of, if you write in to grbooknook@gmail.com, we will send you robot lips to practice kissing. We want everyone out there to experience love, so write to us if you're looking for something.
Supplies are limited, so act now.
Supplies are limited. We will not open or sign them. I cannot make that guarantee. Couple of notes here at the end of the show for you all to pay attention to. Our next episode with the new book is going to be coming out on July 31st, a end of a month thing here. We haven't mentioned this before, but I did want to give a shout out. The song at the beginning and end of our show is Orbital Romance by Sir Cubworth. Thank you so much for letting us use this song during the process of our show. I think it was a perfect fit for the lukewarm romance we experienced.
This cold as steel romance that we waded through a little bit. I still find that review a little troublesome. Too much romance. I was like, what kind of books are you reading? I don't like books where male characters and female characters have eye contact.
At what moment was there the actual romance? Was it the weird part where he was going to murder her to look at her actual body and then sleep with it? Like, what was the plan there? All right, then, to tie it off, I think we should just rapid fire the casting of The Ship Who Sang live. We've already got Vin Diesel as the Braun. Who plays Helva? Tilda Swinton, who
Maya
plays. Oh, I like yours better. Maya Rudolph as Helva is a genius call. It's a great pull. Well, then who's Kristen Wiig going to be, and Tina Fey and Amy Poehler?
Theoda, Kira, and we're gonna gender swap. Oh, Ansra. Boom.
Oh my gosh, incredible casting right off the bat. Who gets to play our Solar Prane, our lead actor, our amazing Lin-Manuel Miranda? We already talked about.